Hello everyone and welcome to a new video on martial politics. Today I am going to be discussing national conservatives slash populists who I think are just LARPing and not that like they're doing it dishonestly, but that they're taking on this brand that they think they're pushing against the Republican establishment. Meanwhile, I mean, they're doing, whatever the establishment wants. So this video, I'm not really gonna talk about specific people. I'm gonna mention maybe two people in this whole video who I think fit this definition, and I'll mention some examples of people who do fit this description, like authentic people. So, yeah, what I'm first going to discuss is, what actually makes a national populist. Like, people can throw around whatever term they want, they can call themselves, whatever. Doesn't matter. You can call yourself, oh yeah, let's say, I don't know, you're a libertarian, and you think you fit the definition well, but, some people have different definitions of what a libertarian is. And it can be different in different people's minds. Like for example, probably one of the most libertarian members of the U.S. Senate, um, Rand Paul from Kentucky. He is I'd say he's a pretty libertarian senator. But actual libertarians will say that he's actually not a libertarian. So I mean, that's just one small example. People can call themselves different things, but the mirror may not be whatever that is in other people's minds. So, what I'm going to primarily discuss is people who are national, describe themselves as national conservatives, but don't actually, or populists, and don't actually support, actual nationalist politics. So, I think one of the easiest examples is definitely like people who are definitely, who think that like Trump is like this national conservative, he changed everything and he was changing a lot of things like by himself, like it when he was in office. I'd say Trump did change a lot of things in different ways. I don't think he like ever implemented each like that much major change when he was in office. But, some people argue, oh, he did actually. And these are, I say there's a lot of people that are like this. Um, if Trump were to be nominee in 2024, which, I mean, it's still a while away from now, but if the election were like a year from now, yeah, I'd say, yeah, he'd definitely be the nominee. And I don't know if I would really trust Trump to, be president for another 4 years. I actually was supportive of him last year when he was running for re-election, but I kind of just changed my mind about him. Um, and I don't really see Trump really changing things in public office. I think that position ought to be left to someone much more intelligent, uh, more intelligent, articulate, someone who actually knows what they're doing. And there's a lot of politicians out there like that, but they're always doing it for the wrong means. Like I'd say Mitch McConnell's one of those people. He's a very ruthless politician when he's trying to get his way. I mean, he ran constant obstruction against Obama, and he manipulated Trump to support his own policies too. So I mean, he's a very cutthroat politician, I'd say, and I'd say that's the kind of thinking that we need on the national conservative slash national populist side. And something that's really unfortunate is that there's a lot of people who I think just don't fundamentally understand what populists actually want. Um, there are a lot of I'd say one thing that national populists do have in common overall, I'd say, is definitely wanting to limit immigration, which, I have that position too. I would support that as well. And I'd say that's a unifying position, but some people don't necessarily support the same things as other people. So, for example, I'll think of, let's say, healthcare, for example. We technically do have a single payer system here in the United States, but it's only for, retired and old people. So that system, I'd say works pretty well. Um, in the Democratic Party, they had this, you know, there were some who supported basically a public option, um, which is basically, uh, it basically establishes a system where people can buy into a single payer healthcare system and then they get the return. Like, it's a federal program, and individual citizens are allowed to basically buy into it, and then they get, healthcare protection. So, I think that'd be a pretty good policy here in the United States, at least, for maybe a year. I'd say, but definitely over time, we definitely need to adjust to something more, nationalized, and that would apply to all citizens. But there are some people who are, describe themselves as national conservatives or populists who, they're like, let's kind of split it. So I believe, not split it, but basically leave government basically as a sort of distributor in the system, but then you also have like a sort of private element to it, which, yeah, I definitely see merit in that. Um, the only problem I'd say with this is that the United States is such a large country, and I think that, um, in my opinion, it's just more efficient if a national government would implement that overall rather than relying on some, shitty private companies. I mean, we've already seen what private healthcare companies in the United States do. They price gouge their customers. They uh, they just fundamentally make it, much harder for them to live, uh, much healthier and happier lives. So I think getting rid of the private element of healthcare is actually very crucial. And there are some people who don't feel this way, and this is only uh, one issue where, I think this is true for national populace. There's many others. And one of the other examples, I'd say, I'll mention an issue where people are sort of united again, which I'd say is definitely trade protectionism. I say, yeah, but I'd say I'm a very hardline trade protectionist. I'm sort of more of an isolationist, which is sort of connects with my foreign policy. Or I don't think we should have troops like anywhere outside of the United States and its territories. Maybe leave like a slight military presence in some European countries, but overall, I'd support, withdrawing most troops from all over the world. I don't really see it as being necessary in the current world order, at least in Europe. Asia is more of an iffy thing because I sort of have mixed feelings about how much of a threat China actually is. I'd say economically, yeah, I'd say they're definitely a huge threat, but I think like by themselves militarily, I'm not too sure about it. Um, so kind of iffy on there, but I definitely support mass withdrawal. Some other people don't want that, and another thing I do want to mention, sort of, least actually, it's actually sort of a good segue into foreign policy. We were talking about the Afghanistan withdrawal, which was a big thing. In the past, like almost 2 months actually. Kind of hard to believe it's been that long. People were criticizing Biden for the withdrawal. I think fundamentally, I think the withdrawal was the right thing to do. And I've seen a lot of people on Twitter who, are, much more, authentic with their response to it. They were like, yeah, I completely support what Biden did. I'm anti-war, and this is what Trump should have done. But there are some people, I'm not going to mention any specific people. I don't want to, I'm not really interested in mentioning specific people, but there are some people who are basically like, oh yeah, like I'm pro withdrawal, but I'm not in favor of the way he did it. Well, yeah, you could say, I'd say there were maybe like one or two things. I'd say definitely the abandonment of the Bagram Air Force. I'd say that was a I'd say that was a mistake, but I really don't think that is fundamentally like that important. Sure, the Taliban might have seized military equipment, but are we actually like at any threat of being attacked by Afghanistan or something? Yeah, I'd say that part. I'd say yeah, I probably should have withdrawn the equipment slightly better. But overall, I think Biden mostly did the right thing, and there are a lot of more principled people who agree with me on this. And some people do not. People who call themselves national conservatives or populists, whatever. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna mention some other stuff too. There, another thing is with certain candidates over which people support who, you know, and stuff like that. So I think one of the best examples, honestly, is the Ohio Senate Republican primary now. Um, that primary is actually, I'd say, probably it's like on top, probably top priority for me. I am focusing on that a lot. I think it is pretty important. Obviously, if you've watched any of my previous videos or you know me on Twitter, I support JD Vance for the Senate nomination there. But there are a lot of people who, they realize the same thing as I do, that basically, Josh Mandel, Jane Timken, these people are, complete jokes. They're not really serious. They're not America first. They cite different reasons, but they eventually lead to the same conclusion that basically these people cannot be trusted. And of course, I 100% agree with that. The problem I run into with some people is that they're like, oh, why do you so JD Vance is a former never Trumper. Why would you ever support him? You can't trust him. Which I mean, it's a bit ridiculous. I mean, JD Vance has JD Vance, I think since like around 2017 or 2008, I say more 2018. JD Vance has been, he's been on like Tucker Carlson a lot. He's been on Fox News a lot, and I'd say he's pretty right wing on like cultural stuff, cultural issues. And he supported Trump in 2020. Um, he's talked to many different, conservative people. I mean, he was on Ben Shapiro's show. He was on, you know, like a Tucker Carlson. He was talked to a lot of important right wing figures. I don't like Ben Shapiro, by the way, but I'd say he is a pretty, I guess, high ranking conservative person. And Vance has been something that Vance has been very consistent in is his, you know, people always say like, oh, he's a flip flopper. He's not consistent at all, which no. I've looked at speeches of him since around 2018 at his and in 2019 actually. This was the National Conservative Conference, and he had an address there. His speech was called Beyond Libertarianism, and he basically, I mean, this is probably one of the most important. I think if I did mention it in a previous video about JD Vance, but it is a very important video, and I think that that speech is basically a blueprint for what is national populism or conservatism, whatever you want to call it. And when people say they're like, "Oh, we shouldn't trust JD Vance because he was a never Trumper. He voted for Evan McMullen," and I'm like, I mean, the primary is in May 2022. He decided to vote for Evan McMullen almost 6 years prior. Does that even make any sense? It's like, here, let me think of an example. Let's say, you're talking to an employer trying to get a job. And you're like, oh, your employer's like, oh, 6 years ago you did this certain thing which disqualifies you from doing the job, even though ever since then you've proven yourself to be consistent and a good worker or whatever. And they're like, oh no, you're not getting a job. Well, wouldn't that make you kind of pissed off? I mean, does that even make sense? No. JD Vance is definitely fundamentally changed a lot since 2016. I mean, he's converted to Catholicism. He's definitely, he's active among like these right wing, I'd say, I guess, philosophical figures. Um, but again, there are still people who don't support him. So when I see people like this, it's like you describe yourself as a national conservative or populist. Why don't you support him? Oh, I just don't trust him because he didn't support Trump in 2016. I'm like, how is that even a legitimate argument? And they'll always go like, oh, it's just they'll say, how can we trust him in the Senate? He's gonna be like Mitt Romney. I saw some person saying on Twitter, they're like, oh, JD Vance was a fan of Mitt Romney. Since when? Like what? That's like just wholly made up. Honestly, that's like it's like a smear. It's literally a smear. Um, I mean, you can't just lie about things like that. So, I mean, this is just there's a lot of things that I have problems with other people who describe themselves as national conservatives and they end up supporting the same establishment politics. And that's my main message I want to talk about here. Do not support people who I say are like Trump, that, they'll have this. I mean, Trump has gotten kind of worse recently, but he used to be pretty good with his rhetoric when he would talk about actual policy and actual substance. But now he's obsessed with the audit in Arizona, the stolen election that people are so obsessed with for some reason. Even though the election, it's almost been a year now. I mean, like, please just get over it. It's literally almost been an entire year since this happened. Um, but people won't get over it, and there are more important issues than getting salty over some election which you lost. Something you have to realize is that you have to get better, and you have to support better policies, and you have to realize, you know, how crucial, how much did Trump actually do when he was in office? How important was he? I say, yeah, I think Trump. I think he was pretty good on immigration. I say, pretty on a whole, he was pretty good. But there are a lot of other issues where he was just completely terrible. And there are a lot of people who just won't accept that. And if you're an actual national populist, someone who is, a populist is someone who is skeptical of the elite and wants to trump their power. Kind of funny. Uh, someone who wants to limit the power of the elite, fight for the people. You're gonna simp for some multi-billion and multi-billionaire president. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. You have to fight for actual policies that benefit people. You have to realize that, like, sure, Trump might have been good on certain issues, but he was certainly not a good president as a whole. I don't really hate Trump that much, but I wouldn't want him to be president once again. But you know, this is my opinion. And I think that if you're really serious about wanting to change the country, then you have to realize that there are perhaps other people who can lead in a better direction and lead more effectively than Trump can. And, I don't want this to be taken the wrong way, like I'm some, stupid retard neoliberal who's like has Trump uh, derangement syndrome. No, I actually don't have that at all. I just think, I'm much more. I mean, I'm skeptical of most public figures and what they want, and there are like literally no public figures who I just don't question at all. Like even JD Vance, I question, you know, how legitimate, are his concerns specifically, I'd say with big tech. I'd say yeah, he's been pretty consistent on it. The only problem I have is with, he's being supported by Peter Thiel, and I say there are some things where I say Vance could definitely improve on, but I think overall, I mean, I agree with Vance on like 90-95% of the issues. Uh, so yeah, this is just one final message. I want people to be skeptical of uh, power from individuals, and actually put their feet to the fire and question them and put pressure on them. I don't think it's acceptable that people are just complacent. They're like, oh, don't harass politicians, don't bother them. I mean, these people hold control over your lives. You're just gonna let them do whatever you want. Our politicians serve us. They don't. They're supposed to be. They're supposed to represent us. They're supposed to push for our interests, and almost all of them don't. There are very few politicians who will actually do anything in power, and you know that's just one thing I have to say. And one thing I just have to say, one final thing, is that when you're thinking about actual policy, you're not discussing this, election bullshit. I mean, there are people who are talking about the presidential election, which isn't, it's like 3 years from now. Like, a lot of stuff can happen from now until then. The midterms haven't even happened yet. So, there's still a lot to think about. There's still a lot to do. And you can't just be thinking about all these endless debates over, oh, is Trump the better nominee or DeSantis? DeSantis won't do as well in the Rust Belt. There are people who are obsessed with that nonsense when we should be talking about actual ideas and policies that will benefit actual people. So I'd say yeah, one final thing. Again, I keep saying that, but this is the last thing. Look at actual policy again. Just look at actual policy. Fight for the policies that best benefit, what you actually benefit your constituents, and push for, a better country. And I think there are a lot of people who don't. I feel like there are still people who are sort of trapped within, what's acceptable for a right wing person to believe in. And I'd say I'm right wing on most things. I mean, culturally, I'd say I'm pretty right wing. Uh, but when it comes to economics and interest for the people, I'd say I'm an actual populist, and I want government to actually implement policies that will benefit people, and not just I don't support complete welfare. Um, I think the best remedy to welfare is actually increasing, people's wages and encouraging more healthier society, better work ethic, stuff like that. Not to say I would, support getting rid of welfare completely. Obviously, I would not want that, but I'd say that over time, I think if you want a more healthy society, then you will need to do this. So, anyways, uh, I think that's really it. Um, And yeah, I hope you all have an excellent day. And if you have any, comments or questions or maybe a criticism, of course, uh, um, I will respond to that in the comments, or you can follow me on Twitter and direct it to me on there. Uh, till then, I hope you all have an excellent day, and I'll see you all in the next video. Farewell.